So after decades of cooking professionally and at home, I've identified the knife skills that actually matter. I'm not talking about culinary school fancy cuts, I'm talking about knife skills that you're going to use every day. So we're going to start with the knives that you actually need and show you how to care for them properly, and then we're going to master the essential cuts that will transform your kitchen prep. No nonsense, just practical everyday skills to help you master the prep of your meat, fish and veg. And stay tuned for the carving techniques that are going to make your proteins look amazing when you're plating up. Now let's get stuck in. Now you see all these beautiful knives in front of me. Well, the truth is you actually only need 4 of them. Now this isn't a video when I get into all these knives and their uses, and they do all have their use, but this is the 4 that I think you actually need to start cooking properly. So the first knife you're going to need is a good chef's knife. Around 24 centimeters is a good size, and you're going to use this for almost everything that you do. Cutting veg, cutting meat, cutting steaks. A small serrated paring knife. These things are invaluable. They're perfect if you just want to quickly cut a piece of fruit. If you want to open a bag of something, they're invaluable and you'll find them in most chef's knife rolls. A serrated bread knife, and as it says on the packet, it's for cutting bread. Now I'm not a huge fan of one-trick ponies, but unfortunately, this is one of the ones that you can't do without. If you cut bread, you need one of these. And finally, a boning knife. Now this is only really relevant if you cut up meat and fish, but if you do ever cut up meat and fish, which I encourage that you do, you're gonna need one of these. Pointy tip, blade's not particularly flexible, perfect for cutting up steaks, taking silver skin off meat, and even filleting fish. So the next part is, how do you care for these things? Well, cleanliness is super important. Don't put it in the dishwasher, just wash it with hot soapy water and dry it really, really well before you put it away. A sharp knife is far safer than a blunt one. It doesn't take particularly long. Let me show you the basics of how to sharpen a knife. And contrary to popular belief, this is not a knife sharpener. This is a honing rod. You can get them in steel. This is a ceramic one. Either of them will do the same job. It's literally to keep the tip of your knife nice and straight. To sharpen your knife, you're going to need some kind of sharpener. I like to use whetstones. I only think you need 2, a 1000 grit and a 5000 grit. And I'm going to show you how to use those really quickly. There is other alternatives. There's the drum ones you can see, I've seen online lately. Apparently they work well, I've never used one. The other thing you can use, although it's not really advised, is one of these pull-through sharpeners. The reality is this will keep a sharp knife somewhat sharp, but it's not going to put a new edge on a knife. This is better than nothing, but I do encourage you to learn how to use these. So how to use whetstones? Well, it starts with water. Believe it or not, you start with a 1000 grit first, then you're going to move to a 5000 grit. So you need to soak these in water. There's lots of rumors around this about how long you soak them for. An hour is perfectly fine. As a general rule of thumb, once bubbles stop appearing on the surface, it's good to use. These 5000 grits, or the really fine ones, you don't really need to soak. And if you do soak, they do get really brittle. So you're only gonna soak this for like 1 minute before you use it, and then you're gonna make sure you keep it wet when you're using it. Once your stone has stopped bubbling, shake it off. You still want some water on there. These things come with quite handy boxes that are pretty non-stick, and they have like a groove in the top to put them in. You still got to keep them wet, so every now and then just put a bit of water on the top. Now angle. General rule of thumb, Japanese knives are at 15% angle, and that's the degree that you're turning the knife against the stone. For European knives, it's 20 degrees. Just aim for somewhere between 15 and 20 degrees. You don't need to get super technical, although I'm sure there's going to be someone in the comments that's like, oh, it has to be 17 degrees. If you're struggling with that, you can get these little guards here that put it at the proper angle, which is a great way to learn because it's a good guide to start with. You're gonna start at the tip, you're gonna push away at that angle. Push away, push away. Slowly move down the knife until you get to the end. Start again, push away. I'm only putting pressure on the way down. Once you get good at this, you can go back and forth like this, but you've got to make sure that when you're going away, you're putting pressure. When you're coming back towards yourself, you're not putting any pressure, and that blade is just skimming across the top of that stone. See all this dark stuff that's coming on the top? That's the pieces of your blade leaving your blade and going on top of the stone. Don't wipe it off, it's good. It's an abrasive and it helps to sharpen your knife. Work it down a couple of times. Don't be fooled as well. That action comes very naturally to people that have been sharpening knives for a long time, or sharpening chisels like builders, like my mate Fred over there. But if you're not used to it, you're gonna feel really awkward doing it. Just take your time. Push away, lift up if you need to. Push away and lift up. Push away and lift up. Then you might just start getting a bit better at it, and it will start to come pretty natural to you. Once you've done it a few times, you're gonna take your thumb and you're gonna run it over the blade, down the blade. What you're trying to feel for is a burr. A burr is a raised piece of metal on the end. Now I can feel this burr from here to here is where I can feel it right now. You want to feel that burr all the way up. So I know that I've got a burr here, my burr kind of disappears here. So I'm going to focus back on that part of the knife. A little bit more water, starting to get a bit dry. Feel for the burr again. The other thing worth mentioning, if you're right-handed like I am, you're going to start with you using your right hand in your handle, and you're going to turn the blade towards you, and you're going to start on that side first. If you're left-handed, you're going to turn the blade towards you, and you'll start on that side first. Okay, now I've got a burr all the way up that blade. Nice even burr, real life. That took about 7 minutes. So now we've got the burr on the side, we're going to flip the knife over, and you're going to drag the knife towards you. Now it feels a lot more unnatural than it does the other way. So just take your time, start at the top, at the heel of the knife, and as you're dragging it down, pull the knife away and to the other side of you. So you get the whole blade in one swipe. Make sure you got plenty of water on there. Then you can start with the motion like before if you want, making sure this time you're only putting pressure when you're pulling the knife back. Just continue doing that motion until you don't feel the burr. It should just feel completely flat. Now I don't want to get too technical here, but Japanese knives do come in two bevels, which is the direction of the blade. You have a single bevel and a double bevel. Most knives are double bevel. If you have a single bevel knife, you're obviously going to favor that one side far more than the other side. But for the interest of this, if you're just starting out and you don't know what you've got, I think it's safe to assume that you have a double beveled knife, which is this technique. You can have the same amount of sharpening on one side as you do the other. All right, I'm happy with that. We're gonna move on to the 5000 grit. So this is still dry. I'm just gonna plonk it in the water for a minute, not even, 30 seconds. Same as before. Push away, bring close to yourself. So because you can't feel that bevel, you're just gonna do it until you see a nice polished edge on one side, flip it over, same on the other. Now you're going to use your honing rod just to finish it off, and you're just gliding it at that same angle along the edge. If you feel unsafe doing that, you can do it on a bench like this. Or just do it away from yourself. It's a bad habit of mine. I've always done it towards myself and I should really change it. So there you go. There's a very quick intro into how to sharpen a knife, the basics covered. If you want a more in-depth video on knife sharpening, let me know in the comments and I'll get one of my knifesmith mates to come over and show us how to do it properly. Let's see how well I did. First cab off the rank, knife safety. How to hold a knife. Use your 3 fingers, grip around the handle, and use your thumb and your index finger on the front of the blade to make sure that you got good control over it. A little bit different with a boning knife. You'll sometimes see butchers boning like this. Don't do that at home. That only makes sense when you're doing meat that's hanging. So if you've got a hanging carcass, it makes sense to do it like that. At home, doesn't make sense. Just hold the handle similar to like you would with a chef's knife, but you're gonna grip around here, you're not going to grip the blade. Next thing with safety, make sure there's something underneath your board, like one of these non-slip mats, to stop your board from moving around. I like to have one board that I use for meat and fish only, raw food only. This is the only thing I use this board for. This board, you'll only ever see me use it for things like veggies or cooked meat, things like that, and then we wash them off after the end of every use. One board for raw meat, one board for everything else. In the household, I think is good enough. And if you don't have a non-slip mat, just a wet tea towel or a wet paper towel does just as good a job. So I'm gonna show you how to break down a chicken for a couple of reasons, because I think it's a great way to get around some butchery, some basic butchery and learning where joints are in animals. It's also a great way to save some money. Take your sharp boning knife. The first thing we're gonna do is take the legs off. We're gonna run our blade between the drumstick and the breast. You're gonna make sure you cut the skin closer to the leg, then the breast, and I'll show you why in a second. So one slit through there and you've cut that skin and you're gonna be able to see straight in there. Now we're gonna bend that leg over and you're gonna hear a pop, or not, because it didn't pop. But what's gonna happen is that thigh bone's gonna pop out. We're gonna run our blade, use the point of your blade into it and back. Take that whole leg off. So from here, you've got a few options. You can cut this in half, like so. So if you use your finger, right where this piece of fat lies, you're gonna find a joint. Just run your blade right through that. You've got a drumstick and a thigh. You can bone these out, or you can leave it as a drumstick. To bone a thigh out, there's a bone that runs from here to here. The tip of our blade, and we're gonna run right down the side of that bone. We're just gonna keep running our blade down it until we know we're past halfway. Then we'll do the same on the other side. To get underneath it, simply put your blade right through and cut up. There you go, you got a boned thigh. Now you can leave the skin on those and cook them with the skin on, or you can simply pull the skin off if you don't want the skin. There's a thigh. So from here, this is what we call the chicken crown, or if you take that part of the carcass off. I'm not going to because I want to take the breasts off, but if you ran a knife through here, you have a chicken crown, which is great for roasting actually. But what we're going to do is take the wings off. Very similar to the leg. It's going to run a blade, and you're going to put your finger in and you're going to feel for the joint. Then you're just going to pop that joint out, and then you see how it popped out just there? Just keep running that through. There you go, there's a chicken wing. Now you can leave it whole like that. I like to take these tip bits off because you can't eat them. Well, you can, there's nothing wrong with it, but there's not much meat on there. And you can save that for the bone pile. And then you've got the whole wing, or if you want to cut that in half, just run your blade through there. You're going to find that joint with your finger and cut right through it. So we've got our chicken crown here, and now we need to take the breasts off. So you've got a bone that runs down the center here. You can see it pretty clearly. We're going to take our blade and we're going to cut right from the wishbone. So the wishbone is a bone that runs in here. So we're going to cut right from the wishbone till we hit the bottom. And if you want to, you can feel in here that that's that sternum bone. I'm going to run our blade all the way down to the end. Make sure you get that tender, and then we're just going to follow the tip of our blade along that wishbone up the top, all the way down that carcass, getting as much of that chicken breast off as you can, then through the bottom. Now, because we've taken our wing off, we can just cut through there, but you can do that and leave the wing on. Now we've got our chicken breast. We're just going to tidy it up so it doesn't look quite so scraggly. And the reason at the start I said make sure we cut close to the thigh is so that if you do want to have your skin on your chicken breast, it's not coming up here. Often you'll see when people are carving chickens or butchering chickens for the first time, the breast skin will be like that, and that's because they haven't taken, or they haven't left enough on when they're carving it. So there you go, you got one chicken breast. Now from here you can still take that skin off if you don't want it. Simple as that. And you could even take the tender off. Pull that out. There's your tender. So that is how you break a whole chicken down. It's really not that difficult with a bit of practice, and the best part, you're gonna save yourself a bit of money. Now I'm gonna show you how to fillet a fish. Now this is a very basic guide to fish filleting because fish come in all shapes and sizes. We're just gonna think about some groups of bones, and then you should be able to figure your way around most fish from there. Now you can use a pair of kitchen scissors and take off all these fins. Be very careful of these top ones especially. They're sharp and they have a little bit of poison in them often, so if you spike yourself on one, it hurts and it usually gets infected, so just be careful around those ones. However, most of the time, I don't even bother taking them off. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take our blade, we're gonna run it down from the top of the head all the way down to this bottom dorsal fin. So get it as close as you can to that dorsal fin there. You're gonna poke it through away from yourself and then run the blade up. Continue that cut all the way to the top of the spine. Now at the spine here, put your hand on the fish and you're gonna really carefully run your blade down the spine as close as you can to the frame of the fish, all the way to the tail. Then you can peek in there and you can see what you're doing a bit better. We're just gonna run our blade all the way down it. There's lots of ways to do this. You see often fishmongers with fish like this, they'll just whip the whole thing off in one go really quickly, but they fillet hundreds of fish, if not thousands a day. So don't pretend to be one of those guys. You're just a normie like me, and it's just pays to take your time and follow the rib cage all the way down. Now you're gonna get to this part and you're gonna find the actual rib cage, which are these bones here. You wanna run your blade as close as you can to them. And I just wanna focus on this top part of the fillet first until we get most of it off. This part here, the belly, can be tricky to get off. So we're just gonna run our blade all the way down. When you start to see skin like that, just give it a hand put the blade through it and then pull away, because that'll break that skin away. All the way down to the belly. So there's your fillet of fish. It's ready to go pretty much, apart from the pin bones. I'll show you those in a second. If you're gonna turn this into fish stock, which I do encourage you to do, don't waste it. You can see if you can get any meat off here. We used to have to scrape all this meat off here with like a spoon like this. You get a spoon and you just scrape all that meat off, and then that's what we'd be allowed to use for stuffed food. Look at that, you know, there's some protein there. If you are working on big fish, if you're butchering a tuna, you're not watching this video, you probably should watch another one, but then it is worth scraping all that meat off, because there's a lot of meat in between those bones on a big animal like that. Take all your fins off with a pair of kitchen shears. The other thing I like to do, especially if I'm barbecuing, is take this off. This is the collar. It's got a bit of blood on it. Just give that a good rinse underwater and grill those with some salt on a barbecue. Absolutely delicious. So I'm gonna take the head off, cut this into pieces just so it's more manageable. You're gonna rinse it underwater till there's no more blood. And ideally, oh, this is probably a bit gruesome for YouTube. You'll take the eyes out. We'll just pretend that those are out. So there you go. Now you got your eyes out, which we didn't show so I don't get demonetized. We're gonna rinse this under cold water until the water runs pretty much clear, and then we can make fish stock. Fish stock only takes like 30 minutes in total to make. So finally, we just need to pin bone these, and it's really simple. You will need a pair of tweezers. If you don't have one, go to the garage and see if you have a pair of bottlenose pliers. They work as well. What you're gonna do is feel for the bones. They'll be in one line. I can feel them down here. Get the end, support the flesh around it, and a swift pull, and the bone should come out. So our fillet's been pin boned. Now you can just serve it like this. I'd keep the skin on most of the time if you're gonna pan fry it. If you do wanna take the skin off, however, sharp knife, you're gonna bring the fillet nice and close to you, and you're gonna cut down at an angle until you reach the skin. Once you're at the skin, you're gonna run your blade at a slight angle. I'm gonna really exaggerate this, but you're gonna slight angle down. What that does is keep it as close to the skin as possible. Very slight angle down until you get about 3 blade lengths into it. Then push it back and grab the skin hard. If the skin's super slippery, cut a hole in it. And that way you've got somewhere to shove your finger, and you'll have a great handle for the skin. The trick is to actually move the skin and not the fish so much. So I'm wiggling the skin back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There you go. Skin's off. We've got a fillet of fish, not the burger, and one with the skin on. Ta-da! How to cut beef. This is a flank, and the reason I've chosen to show you a flank is because I can demonstrate grains really clearly. But first of all, we need to attack silver skin. It's a great thing that boning knives are used for. So silver skin is this tissue here that sits on top of the muscle and usually under the fat. And we need to get it off when we're cutting any meat, really, if we can. If you're slow cooking, you can kind of leave it on. But what you're gonna do is take the point of your knife, you're gonna place it under the silver skin, then we're gonna point it up, and we're gonna run our blade until it runs out. That was a bad example. In, up. Because this is what we're looking for. We're looking for silver skin with not much flesh on it. You don't wanna waste any of that delicious muscle. All this membraney stuff as well, we wanna take that off. Very similar way, except the membraney stuff should sometimes just kind of pull off. Just like that. Might need a bit of a helping hand. Then with steak, you want to cut it against the grain. There's a couple of exceptions. The only real exception to it is if you're cutting up a picanha or a rump cap. But with something like this, if you're cutting a sirloin for steak, a ribeye for steaks, or a flank for stir fry meat like we're going to cut this way, first of all, because we don't want pieces that long. And then we're going to cut this way. Why? Because we want shorter grains. There's lots of long grains of meat and muscle that run this way. If we cut it this way, we shrink those grains down to as small as we can. So we're gonna cut our piece the width that we want, and then cutting against the grain, we're gonna cut our stir fry meat. So look what happens when we take a piece of meat here that we've cut against the grain. Without too much force, I can pull that apart. So we're gonna cut a piece of meat that I've cut with the grain, and I'm not exaggerating, I can't pull that apart. There you go, I did eventually. It took a lot more muscle. Against the grain, with the grain. So there you go, things to remember. When you're cutting silver skin off, try and leave as much meat on the muscle as possible, cut against the grain, And if you want to see a whole video of how I broke a rump down that fed a family of 4 6 times, then click the link above. The other thing to remember is that chicken and pork don't really have grains you have to worry about too much, whereas beef and lamb do. It's time for the veg, and we're going to turn this into this. And then back again, because I need to carry on with my intro. So I'm going to teach you everyday cuts, not fancy cuts, not chefy cuts, everyday cuts to get dinner on the table for your friends and family in a reasonable amount of time. If you want a video where I go into depth on very technical details around knife skills, let me know. And if enough of you ask for it, we'll make it happen. But first up, let's quick fire through these veg. Sliced onions. You're going to use sliced onions for things like salads or for caramelizing. Take the top off, then the bottom off, and because we're slicing them, we want to make sure we get that root. Onion in half, any yellow or green bits, pop out. We're slicing this way with the grain. Use your hand like a claw over the onion, slice down. We're resting our blade on our knuckle, and that way we can guide where our blade lands on the onion. As you're slowly moving through the onion, bring your hand back or open the claw up a little bit. Sliced onions, done. And that's what you use an essential scraper for, so you're not running the blade of your knife across your board unnecessarily. Next up, the large dice onion, used for things like curries and stews. Top off, bottom off, similar to the last one, where we're not keeping the root. In half. We're going to go across the onion every 1.5 centimeters, cutting down but keeping it together. And we're going to turn our blade as we go over the onion. Now we're going to turn the onion and we're going to cut the other way, straight down. Large dice, done. Fine dice onion, perfect for things like pico de gallo, or if you're using them in sauces and you kind of want the onions to disappear. Come back. Top of the onion off. I'm not going to cut any more off the bottom of that. I want that root there to keep the onion together. In half, using the claw technique, we're going to slice the onion, but we're not slicing it all the way through. Using that claw to keep it all together. Optionally, you can run your knife through it this way. A lot of people argue that that's not necessary. I've always done it, so I always will. Again, with the claw technique, we're going to finely slice the onions as thin as we can. All we're left with is that piece of core and a little bit of onion. Finely diced onions, done. Why do I sound like Gordon Ramsay today? Onion slices for burgers or for onion rings. The thickness depends on what you're going to do. Not sure I even really need to demonstrate this. Take the top off. The only thing I would say is be very careful because you're trying to deal with a round thing on a flat surface. So have a good grip of it. Use your claw. Use the palm of your hand on your board to stable yourself. Cut through. Onion rings. Done. Capsicum or bell pepper. Put it on its side. We're going to cut through. It looks like I'm being very wasteful, but you see why I'm not in a second. Pull the center out. Take the bottom off. Cut down. Open it up. Slice the white part out. Off comes the top. Taking the extra green part out. For a stir fry, cut into small diamonds by cutting opposite and then turning. Don't forget the bottom and the top. If I'm cutting a capsicum for a salad, into 3, easier to handle. Stack them up if you're feeling brave and slice. Capsicums, done. Broccoli. Feels like these things are almost extinct these days. Everyone's eating that tender stem stuff. But if, like me, you still prefer these ones, put the broccoli facing down and cut the florets off first step. Don't throw this part out. Now we're going to go through the florets. I'm going to look for them, the ones that we want the right size. For me, that's a great size. This is too big. So to cut this, knife in, split the stem, break the top. Knife in, split the stem, break the top. Then you've got a couple of options of what you're doing with this. It depends on what you're cooking. For me, if I'm doing stir fries, cutting that in half, taking any of the woody bits off the outside, in half again, then just slicing it. It's delicious in stir fries. Even if you're just blanching veg, just blanch that with the rest of it. As you get lower down the stem, you usually have to take more off the outside as it does get a little bit woody. The other thing my friend Sarah does is she keeps them, and then when she's making a bolognese, she'll grate it up and put it in it. Does two things: annoys most Italian nonnas and sneaks veggies into a kid's diet. Broccoli, done. Cucumber, top off, bottom off, down the middle. If you're doing salads, you can cut discs. Often personally, I'll use a spoon and I scrape the seeds out. I do that especially if I'm meal prepping, because the seeds are really watery and you end up with a watery salad. Cucumber, done. Carrots for salads. Honestly, I just peel them. I'll do either two things. It's going in coleslaw, I'll just grate it. Also, if I'm making sofredo, I'll just grate the carrot too. Or if I want some more texture, I'm going to take the top off. Then we're going to cut one slice down carefully, because it's a round object. And we're going to roll it onto that side so it's nice and stable, and we'll cut down again. Take clumps of 4 to 5 pieces, pile them up, and slice the other way. If I'm cutting carrots for a roast carrot salad or for roast on a Sunday, I take a whole carrot, I don't even peel it. Carrots these days don't have a huge amount of skin, and if you're going to roast them, it's going to cook out anyway. Place your carrot down on an angle, slice. Roll your carrot forward a quarter of a turn, slice. Roll, slice. I think you know where this is going. Perfect for roasting, because you get lots of odd shapes that have lots of opportunity to go lovely, golden and roasty. For a stir fry, I'm going to cut the carrot in half, roll it on its flat surface, and then cut it at a large angle, about 10 mil thick. Good surface area, and because it's so thin, it'll still cook nice and quick in your wok. And if a recipe calls for a diced carrot, peeled carrot into quarters, 1 centimeter thick, carrots done. Garlic, break it open. Take any excess off, cut the root system off. On your board, place your knife over it, give it a whack. Skin should just fall off at this point. Using the claw technique, go through it one way, then back the other way, and continue this until it's as fine as you want. You'll often see people with the technique of putting rock salt on it and then mushing it down even more. Certainly works. My only issue with it is it's really hard to make your board not smell like garlic afterwards. If you do want garlic really, really fine, use a really fine grater, and I like to grate it over a bench scraper so that it doesn't even hit your board. This is what I do 80% of the time, especially when I'm in a pinch. Garlic done. Time for the finer things in life. Got some spring onions and some parsley here. For the spring onions, if I'm doing a stir fry, take the bottoms off, discard those. When the spring onion goes from white to green, I'm going to cut that off. Slice this relatively thick if you're going to put it in a stir fry. Keep it thin if you're going into a salad. With the green parts, if you're going to put it in a salad or you're going to toss it through a stir fry last minute, I'm going to take the green parts, we're going to squish them and roll them onto themselves. Then at a nice big angle, using the crawl method, we're just going to slice them as finely as we kind of can. Great little garnish for the top of anything, really. Spring onions, done. Parsley. In a restaurant, you'd be made to pick the leaves very fine. You basically want to take each leaf and have absolutely no stalk like that. But when I'm at home, I'll just get the bunch together and just loosely pick them. A little bit of stalk's not going to hurt anyone. And if it saves me 10 minutes in the kitchen, happy days. I think the trick with cutting any herbs is ideally you only really want to put your blade through it once. I think when you start putting your blade through the herbs multiple times, they can start to bruise, and that's when they kind of just lose their color and their vibrancy. Then we're just going to roll it up. So crunch it together and roll it up like you're rolling a cigar. Now at this point, you need to decide how big you want your parsley. If you want it really fine, you're going to cut it really fine. If you want it really chunky, you cut it a bit thicker. Claw method is really tightly bound here on your blade, all the way down. Perfect in soups, perfect to finish a stew, perfect for make chimichurri. There you go. Finely sliced parsley. And that's how you prep a whole bunch of veggies. Like most things in life, practice makes perfect. So stop buying the already cut up ones, start doing it yourself. It's not that hard. So like I said at the start, I'm also gonna show you how to carve some meat. To carve the perfect chicken actually does start before you cook it and making sure you prep it right before you start roasting it. So there's a couple of things that are important to prep a chicken for roasting. One is trussing the chicken, but I'll tell you more about that later. And the other one is taking the wishbone out, which sits up in here. The other thing we can do is just, there's usually a deposit of fat at the end. We can pull that off. Doesn't really do anything being there, but it makes it easier. So at this point, if you're gonna put stuffing in here, you can put a lemon in the carcass, whatever you want to, you can do that now. But to get the wishbone out, it's gonna be really hard to show this. This is the neck of the chicken. And if we look in here and we can feel it, there's a bone that runs up the side of each of the breasts to the sternum plate. And we need to get that out. So how we get this out is that we get a boning knife and we put it inside the carcass, and starting from the top, working down, we're gonna scrape across the flesh along the bone until the bone is exposed. Once we've scraped all the flesh off the L, or the inside of that bone, you're gonna use your finger to get underneath it and just loosen it. And you can see there that that bone is completely away from the flesh, just not at the top of the bottom. So then you're gonna run your fingers down to the bottom and push it out on both sides. And then once you wiggle your fingers up to the top, you should just be able to pull it away, and then you've got the whole wishbone out raw. So why do we do that? Well, because it makes it way easier to carve the breasts off the chicken once it's roasted. Do you have to do it? No, you don't have to do it. I grew up my whole life eating chicken, and my mum never took the wishbone out. In fact, it was kind of a prized thing. We all fought over the wishbone, and you could make a wish with it or something. I guess that's why it's called a wishbone. Duh. So now that we've handled this chicken so much, you can see the shape's gone a bit flat, and we want it to plump up. The reason being is so it cooks more evenly. It's really simple to do. Take some butcher's string. We're gonna go underneath the wings, around the top, and then over them. That's gonna hold those wings in tight. Then we're gonna bring it down the crease of the legs, under each of the drumsticks and around. And then we're gonna bring those drumsticks tight together. Once more around for good luck, and tie that off. And we trim the edges. There we go, we've got a trussed chicken. It's a lovely shape, it's gonna cook far more evenly. So we've roasted our chicken and it's been lovingly rested. Not sure how you lovingly rest the chicken, but it has been. Hot tip, oh, there's a bit of juice under there, look at that. Okay, we don't want that on our board, so we're just gonna poke a little hole. I would suggest trying to get any of the excess liquid out of the cavity first. It's not gonna go back into the meat at this point, and it's just gonna end up on your board and be very annoying. But do save all that juice, that's good gravy juice right there. First step, cut your twine and unravel your chicken. We want to get the legs off first. So pretty simple, we're going to run our blade down between the bottom of the breast and the thigh. Then we're going to pop the leg out till we hear that joint crack, just like that. And we're going to run our blade in between that joint and along. So there we have a drumstick and a thigh. We're going to feel around, you're going to feel a joint, you're going to cut right through that joint. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So then we're gonna take both these breasts off. I'm gonna leave the wings attached. So we've got the sternum bone that runs right down the center. Start on one side of it, cut through the skin all the way through from the top to the bottom. You'll have a better chance of that skin staying on. And then just run your blade as close to the rib cage as you can. And it should come away nicely from the carcass. You get to the top point and it's similar to the leg. You're gonna see a joint where it kind of comes away a bit. Just run your blade through that joint. Like so. So from here, I like to slice each of these breasts into about 4 or 5 pieces. So I'll leave a piece of breast on the wing and then cut it 3 or 4 more times. That is how you carve a roast chicken. And roast beef, there's not that many rules when it comes to carving roast beef. The main one you have to think about is make sure you're always cutting against the grain. So I've got a piece of roast rib here, or ribeye we call it, cube roll, lots of different names. How do you know what way the grain's going? Well, if you look at it on this cross section, you can see all the grains are ending. They're all small. So that tells us that the grain is running this way. If you think about the muscle, it's actually a pretty good spot here. You can see here that there's lines going this way. That means the grain is running this way, so we want to cut it this way. A couple ways you can carve this, and it depends on the meat that you're having. For a piece of meat like this, like a rib roast like this, I would cut thicker slices, so you have 1 slice per person. If you're doing something that's a bit of a tougher cut, like we call it a rump here in Australia, or I think it's called a top sirloin in the US, I'd like to cut thinner slices because it's not quite as tender and doesn't quite have as much fat inside the meat to make it nice and juicy. So for this one, I'm going to cut slices around this thick. which is about 1.5 centimeters. You can see that that meat's really well rested. What that's going to mean is all those juices are going to stay in the meat and it's not going to end up all over my board. So there's a famous saying in cooking, which is let the knife do the work. So I'm not putting heaps of pressure down. I'm using the knife to push through the meat. So let the knife do the work. And that way you don't get big saw marks. Oh, look at that. That's a good looking lunch. And there you go, a carved roast rib of beef. Like I was saying, if you've got a cheaper cut of meat, like a top sirloin or a rump, I'd cut lots of nice thin slices. Something a bit more tender, like a sirloin roast or a rib roast like this, I'd cut them thick slices so you got 1 piece per person. Remember those few key things, guys. Keep your knives clean, keep them sharp, and practice makes perfect. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that video on advanced knife sharpening skills. That's a mouthful. Like this video if you took anything from it. Subscribe if you're not. We're here every week. Recipes, tutorials, all that good stuff. We'll see you then. Peace.